Thank you. How is everyone today? All right. So how many people just came because they saw the title and thought the speaker was smoking something and they wanted to know what I was on? Okay, we got a couple people. All right. All right. So today I'm going to talk all about fishing. But I want to start by introducing everybody to this behavioral science principle called identical elements. Identical elements is this fascinating thing that happens that we've all experienced before. And the classic example is that you go out, you buy a new car, you drive it off the lot, and then you see that car everywhere. Anyone ever had that happen? So why do I bring this up? Well, the reality is that identical elements is the basis for what I call human virus definitions. When somebody learns through hands-on experience and they get to fail but get really good just-in-time training, and we teach them about things like urgency, like authority, all of a sudden we're creating human virus definitions because that same identical elements thing kicks in. So if I learn really good or really well how urgency is used against me, I will now start seeing it everywhere. Sort of like how I start seeing that car that I just bought everywhere after I drive it off the lot. My name's Joshua Crumbaugh. I'm the founder of a security awareness company called Fish Firewall. And I have over 2 million users that I educate globally. And so I've sent close to 1 billion phishing simulations in my lifetime. And throughout that, I've done or I've managed to get large enterprises to a click rate of sub 1%. How many people have seen sub 1%? I don't see any hands. Now I do that, I've been successful in doing that because I don't focus on education, at least not traditional education. I focus on conditioning, and conditioning is what, I guess, builds those reflexes. And the example I like to give here is how many people trust their best educated employee that does the best on security awareness training. And let's take it, it's a Friday afternoon, it's 5:30 p.m. They're in line at a grocery store waiting to check out, and they're checking their email. Does anyone trust them not to click on the fish in that scenario? I don't see any hands. This is the reason that instinct is so important, because we all have a fast brain and we have a slow brain. Actually, there's a really great book called Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow. If you haven't read it, it's fabulous and it's great to help better understand the human psyche. But our fast brain is our subconscious. It handles things like our reflexes. And when something flies at our face, we don't have to think about putting our arm up to block it. We don't have to think about closing our eyes. It just happens because our subconscious is our body's natural defense mechanism. Now, too often in security awareness programs, we focus on the slow brain, the conscious brain, and trying to make people avoid these attacks in the conscious side of their brain. And that's great, but the body's subconscious is our natural defense mechanism. And it can learn to adapt and protect us against any type of threat. It's the nature of how it works. And so when we simulate phishing attacks and we don't exploit our users and we make sure that there's really good just-in-time training at the end of it, all of a sudden we are creating these human virus definitions. So that is the thesis here and what I'm going to be talking about today. Now today's talk is really broken up into two different parts. The first part is entirely phishing. And then at the second part, we'll jump into the broader security awareness and just best practices to get better results out of your people. One of the initiatives that I have been, that I founded, it's an open initiative that I'm working on, is called Social Engineering for Good. And I'm working with CISOs and CIOs from around the globe. I've got everything from CIOs of professional sports teams and Fortune 50s over to state CISOs and even local municipalities, healthcare, you name it. And one of the things that we're doing with this is taking all of these social engineering tactics that are used against us every day to make our employees do things that they shouldn't otherwise do, and we're flipping them on their head and taking those same tactics to show you how to use them to make your people more secure. So I'm going to end the talk with that, but I want to start by talking a little bit about the psychology of a phishing attack. And why do I do this? Well, I know that everyone is aware, or I would assume most everybody is aware of these different cognitive biases. A cognitive bias, though, if you're not familiar with it, is a mental shortcut that we all use every day to quickly make decisions. It's mostly because we're lazy and we don't like to think, so we turn our brain on autopilot and we use bias for most decisions. Well, the attackers know this and they exploit these biases against us. Now, the reason that I highlight these right here is because these are the top biases that we see exploited every single day. And these are the lessons that need to be taught. Instead of teaching our users to hover or to watch out for spelling or grammatical errors or generic greetings and language and stuff like that, what we need to be doing is teaching them about the underlying psychological triggers. See, these never change. And what's really cool is that they don't just not change from phishing attack to phishing attack. It's the same tactics that are used in vishing, that are used in smishing, that are used in QR code or quishing, or I don't know if I pronounced that right. But anyway, it's the same tactics. And so this is where that identical elements kicks in. If we can use phishing simulations to teach them about urgency, to teach them about authority, to teach them about scarcity, all of a sudden they will start seeing these same tactics elsewhere. So we got to get a little bit more strategic and I guess intentional about what we're training our people on. Now, let's talk about phishing. So my company, we have discovered 32 broad categories of phishing attacks. Now, why does this matter? Well, anyone in here have a 3 strikes and you're out policy? Couple? Anyone ever worked for a company that had a 3 strikes and you're out policy? Okay. How many people agree with a 3 strikes and you're out policy? Real quick, show of hands. See only 1, 2, 3, maybe 4. And how many people disagree with a 3 strikes and you're out policy? Far more hands. And I completely agree with you. I am 100% opposed to 3 strikes and you're out policies. The number one reason is that it tends to create very punitive environments. And what did all of our moms teach us when we were children? It's a classic phrase. You catch more flies than with. There we are. And it's the same is true in cybersecurity. We've got to create positive experiences for our users. When we penalize for somebody failing a training simulation, it's really not a training simulation, it's a test, and we're not taking advantage of the opportunity to learn. Now, the other thing here is because there's 32 different categories, and by the way, one of those categories is social media, and I will point out that just because somebody falls for a Facebook phish doesn't mean they'll fall for a Instagram phish, and vice versa. So I bring this up because my chronic clicker this year has, most years, it seems to be right around 11 phish clicks that my top clicker clicks on in a single year. And that's a lot. That is a very lot. But what I found is that some people have to develop each and every virus definition or human virus definition manually. And what that means is that they're going to have to fail a lot more than other people in your organization before they become secure. Now, my chronic clicker, her name's Mitzi, wonderful older lady. I got to meet her at a board meeting. She came up to me and said, because I talked and she was one of the executives, and she came up after me and she goes, "Oh, you must know my name." And she tells me, and I'm like, "Oh, I do actually." But we got to talking, sweet lady, and what really stuck out to me was that it did take her 11 fish clicks in the very first year to become secure. But she only clicked on one fish the next year, and the year after that, none. And so these people that are your chronic clickers, they can be rapidly triaged if you simply fish them more. So my philosophy is, if you click it fall for, let's say, 3 fish, since we're talking about the 3 strikes and you're out policy, we just simply fish you more. The more you click on, the more you get. And this is the biggest advice that I give to anybody in here, because that's how you can rapidly triage that risk out of those users. Condition them. When they click on something, let's say it's a social media themed fish or a security themed fish, send them more of that exact same type of fish. Because at a certain point, they will stop clicking. And when they do stop clicking, they've learned lessons or developed antiviruses that will last them a lifetime. Because that once it's in your subconscious, it stays. It's sticky. Whereas your conscious, it's not quite as sticky always. The other thing is that attacks are constantly evolving. And what that means is that we have to simulate real-world attacks. Now, the example I'm going to give here is role-based phishing. All of our companies are seeing role-based phishing attacks daily hitting our users. Would anyone disagree? No. How many people are doing role-based phishing simulations against their users? I see a few hands. But it's certainly not the majority. And what that tells me is that a majority of people in this room, or the organizations represented in this room, are not preparing their employees for the actual attacks that they're going to face daily. Did you know that when you make something role-based, a bit of training, so let's take our awareness training, and when we contextualize it to that person's role, it is 15 times more effective. 15 times more effective. I assume the same can be said to a fish as well, that it's 15 times more effective when it's custom tailored to that person's role. And so I can't emphasize enough how important it is that we simulate the actual threats that our people are seeing. I'm going to skip through this. Now I want to highlight just-in-time training. So I see all of these different organizations, and they will run a phishing simulation, and then they will send their users to a login page to see if they'll type in their password. And this is something that's taught as a common methodology in this industry, but I think it is a terrible practice unless you're doing a penetration test. Most phishing is not done for penetration testing. Most phishing is done as part of your awareness training and education. At the moment a mistake is realized, that user goes through an emotional response. That emotional response creates new neural pathways in the brain. It's actually a chemical reaction happening in the brain because of the emotional response. Whenever there is a heightened emotional response, you get heightened retention, about 75% better retention, just simply because the person is going through an emotional response. Which means that if we exploit our users, we are missing out on the greatest education opportunity that we have. So what I recommend that you do instead is make sure that the second your users click, that they have an email waiting for them that says, hey, here were a few of the red flags that could have helped you identify that was a fish. And make sure to keep it to the non-technical. The users get intimidated by technical. But if you talk about things like urgency and authority, they don't get intimidated by that. And those are the things that stay the same across every single phishing attack. Now, the next thing is that we can also, in the moment of the mistake, or not the mistake, use it to reward the employee. And the example, when I say not the mistake, is when your employees report the phish. I think so often our programs are built around catching somebody clicking on the phish instead of catching somebody reporting the phish. I want to catch people doing the right thing, and I want to praise them more than I ever want to catch people doing the wrong thing. I found that if you're running 97% carrots to 3% sticks, you're probably doing a pretty good job. You really don't want to have much in the form of sticks, and I wouldn't make your sticks very hard. A simple, oops, here's a few red flags that you could have noticed is all the more stick you need, because that helps them realize their mistake. The next thing, phishing has been creating very negative experiences for our employees for a long time. Now, the cautionary tale I like to tell about is the little old lady who is expecting a raise, who's a little past retirement age and should just be retiring, but for whatever reason, she hasn't. So now she gets a phish, and the phish says that she's going to get a bonus. She gets all excited about the bonus and calls her family and tells them about it. And then not too long later, she gets an email from her boss, and she finds out that she failed a phishing simulation. And now she has to come in and talk to her boss and be reprimanded. That takes her from an emotional high to an emotional low very quickly. And the last thing we ever want to do is make our staff feel like they're part of the problem. We want to make them feel like they're part of the solution. And so, how do we gamify phishing? Well, the number one thing that I do with my users, I tell them I'm gonna phish them. I say, hey, let me tell you about this phish that pretends to be from your IT team. Let me tell you about this phish that pretends to be from your finance team. Then I say, now be on the lookout, because the next time you see it, it could be me, or it could be the real bad guys trying to get you. Now, what does this do? It creates this hyper-vigilance out of your users, because they know that phish is coming, and they're looking for it. But it also de-weaponizes that situation. If they fall for it, it's, oh, you got me, versus feeling like they've been taken advantage of. And I think the worst scenarios I've seen there is when the phishing simulation uses internal information, there are 0 red flags that the user could notice, and it's just the perfect phish. Well, that's not really great for teaching instincts. That's great for having a gotcha moment. But gotcha moments don't teach our employees, and gotcha moments don't build trust. And so the more that we can gamify, the better. And really, the best reward that we have is just praise. People love to be praised, so praise them. Call them a cyber hero when they report stuff. I do all the time. It sounds cheesy, but I've found that users love cheesy stuff. The cheesier, the more it works. So call them a cyber hero. Praise them publicly, because it makes a huge difference. And then we're not running enough phishing simulations. There are 32 different domains of phishing attacks. That means that if you're running one phish a quarter, it's going to take you 8 years to get through all of the different types of phishing attacks. How many people have over an 8-year retention at their company? Well, that's awesome. We've got 2 people to raise their hand. For the rest of you, we need to find out who's susceptible to what types of attacks in under 8 years, because that's just far too long. And what that means is we have a massive blind spot into our risk as an organization. And then making sure to get that top-down support. I know we talk about it all the time, and you're probably sick to death of hearing about it, but the same bias that makes the gift card scam still successful today is the same bias that makes your programs more effective when the CEO sends an email saying, hey, this is a critical part of our security. And then micro-training is really critical. There have been countless academic studies that have found that the traditional once-a-year security awareness training actually makes your employees less secure, not more secure. Has anyone seen any of those studies? Okay, well, there's quite a few out there. Basically, all of them have the same basic methodology. They run a phishing simulation or a few phishing simulations. They give the training. They run more phishing simulations. And for whatever reason, people click on more the second time after they've been through the training. So real quickly on phishing, a few metrics before I jump into broader security awareness here. Obviously, we want to see the click rates on any phishing attacks, but to me, the better rate is, or the most important metric is, how many of the phishing simulations that I send out are reported back to me. If it's 50%, well, I know that only 1 out of every 2 fish that actually hit our organization are making their way to me. But that's a really good indicator of your culture. And so the higher that number grows, the better your overall culture. And then average time taken to report incidents. So how long did that fish actually sit in that user's inbox before they reported it back to you? And then, of course, how are you actually reducing your number of repeat offenders over time? And that's another really good, I guess, indicator of culture. And the other indicator of culture is how long it takes, or the median time it takes for new employees to become secure and sort of hit that company baseline that we're looking for. You'll actually find that once you have a very security-aware culture, new employees do not take as long to become secure as before you had a good culture. So, did you know that there is a formula for behavior change? So it was developed out of Stanford's behavioral science laboratory by a guy named B.J. Fogg. This formula, B equals MAP, is the reason that social media is addictive. Stanford and Silicon Valley, this particular formula has been baked into most of our tech products for quite a long time. But I highlight it because we have not been using this formula inside of cybersecurity. So basically what it says is if we want to achieve behavior change, we have to have motivation times ability times prompting. If we are missing any one of those 3 ingredients, our efforts will fail. So let's talk about motivation. We know how to motivate our employees. It's their finances, it's their family, and it's their ego. And so the more that we can do to play into those things, the more motivated they will be. And the example I'll give you is that when we talk about cybersecurity, we have to tie it to their finances. We have to tie it to their family. One of my favorite things to do there is to give them homework. So I will come in with a new Roblox scam targeting children, or a new elder fraud scam targeting the elderly. And I will send them home and tell them to take it to their parents, to take it to their children. And it's very manipulative because when they do that and they take it home to their children, to their parents, what happens is that they become the security expert at home. And their parents, their children, start asking them questions, and they have to become more security aware. And so it forces them to take on a new role, and like I said, very manipulative, but highly, highly effective. And this goes to talk about how people are motivated and why it's so critical that we tie all of our efforts to that. Now, the next one is ability. ability really stands out to me with the iOS passcodes. So when they had passcodes, before they had Touch ID, before they had Face ID, they had a 48% adaptation. That was the max. They topped out at 48%. They could not get above it. So then they introduced Touch ID, and it overnight jumped to 86%. Why? Because they made it easier. The real thing that stood out for me there is that when security is the easiest option, or the most secure way is the easiest option, it becomes the default option. So look at things like passcodes that all of a sudden they make us more secure, but they're easier on our users. Or, I've deployed an app store for my employees where they can install, well, just about any software they want, but it's all managed through the company. They don't have to have local admin. These are the types of things that we need to do. Now, obviously, if we're talking about phishing and security awareness, it means giving them a report button so that it's easy for them to report. But ability is really key. And then finally, it's prompting. Prompting in its most simplistic form is your security awareness training. So the big question I like to ask is, well, how often are we prompting? Are we prompting once a year? Are we prompting once a quarter? Are we prompting once a month? Are we prompting once a week? So there was this, I spent 20 years running red teams, worked for the government. I quite literally once watched an NBA game from the Game Operations Center, standing right next to the team manager, and no one even asked me why I was there. But I bring this up because I had this hedge fund in New York City that I had done a penetration test for, or me and my team had. And they had every single human finding. They picked up and plugged in the USB drives. They clicked on the links in the emails. They let us tailgate in behind them. So we tell them, hey, you need security awareness training. And so the next year we come back. Do we have any pen testers in the room? Okay, we got one. So you pen testers, can you guess what happened that next year? Yes, exactly. We had all of the exact same findings. And so I tell the CEO, I say, well, you've got a security awareness problem. And he said, well, that's what you said last year. And you told me to implement security awareness training, and I did. And I said, well, clearly you need to do more. And he says, my employees' time costs me $10,000 an hour. And so, and he says, and I'm not willing to give you more than 1 hour a time per year. And initially, I'm thinking, man, this guy is a complete idiot. But then I got to thinking about it more, and I realized maybe I was the idiot. I don't know. See, I went to school not for computers, but for marketing. Don't know how that happened. But anyway, it's come in handy a few times in my life. And as I was thinking about this, I realized that if we used the rules or the laws of advertising, that an hour was actually quite a bit of time. So if we rethink about how we're doing it, instead of 1 hour here or 15 minutes 4 times a year, what if it's 30 seconds every single week of the year? You're not even at a full half hour of the employees' times, but you've been in front of them talking about security, keeping it front of mind every single week of the year. Now, what's the holy grail in business? It's doing more with less. And this is one of those few instances where we can do more with less. Because whenever you do binge training or binge anything, you get almost zero retention. So we've all binged a Netflix series. Anyone? All right. Has anyone ever rewatched that Netflix series and you couldn't believe how much of it you didn't remember? It's because even when you love it, when you binge, you get almost zero retention. Whereas when you go into bite size, you get very, very high retention. And it's the difference between trying to cover 25 different subjects and covering one. Think before you click. boiling things down to their most simplistic message and presenting that to the user. The next thing I'll mention is that for every negative, there's a positive. Instead of penalizing or punishing employees, you can reward employees when they do the right thing. Instead of telling employees how terrible they do when they do the wrong thing, you can praise them when they do the right thing. Instead of a wall of shame, you can do a leaderboard. So there's a positive to every negative, and I encourage you to flip the script, because when we start encouraging that top 95, 97% of people that we have, and we start praising them, they build up that bottom 3%, and they help to change that culture across our entire organization. Now, I'm going to jump into some of these cognitive biases now, and show and talk about how we can flip them on their head. So the first one is framing bias. Has anyone ever heard of the framing bias? It just says that the way we state things determines how people interpret them. So we've all been using the phrase, security is everyone's responsibility, for years. Anyone still using it? I see a couple hands. So I pick on this one because I was just as guilty. I said security is everyone's responsibility for a long time. But framing can really help change the way we see things. And insecurity is everyone's responsibility. Well, when it's everyone's responsibility, it's no one's responsibility, yes. And you get that group project mentality where they all look at, well, us, because we're the security people, right? And they're like, oh, I don't need to worry about it. Josh has it, or whoever has it. And that is the reason that that phrase is not as powerful as it should be. But if we just simply change one word, security is your responsibility, it makes all the difference in the world. And I only highlight this not because we don't know this as an industry already, but because it's a really good example of why we've got to spend a little bit more time planning out our messaging and thinking about what we're going to communicate to our users. It really almost needs to be more of a function of marketing and communications even than a function of cybersecurity. And I pick on cybersecurity a little bit here, but I think I really don't blame cybersecurity for how punitive most awareness programs have become. And the reason is this. Our cybersecurity people are some of the most intelligent people in any company that we're at. Most of them, however, are not the most well-versed on psychology, behavioral science. Often, I don't know about you guys, but I do not have the best social skills in the world. That's the reason I learned psychology in the first place. A little bit socially awkward. But I think that because we're tasking our most technical people with a very non-technical problem, we get, adverse results than what we're looking for. So let's talk about, I talked about gamification there, but I will say this is the type of thing that you want to do. We want to catch people doing the right thing, and we want to praise them for it. Another example of framing here, you're part of the solution, not part of the problem. The next thing is peer pressure. You can use peer pressure in cybersecurity, and it is highly effective. What I found is that anytime I get over 70%, if I just start broadcasting and telling everybody that 78% of their coworkers have already done this, guess what? They go and they do it. No one wants to be that straggler, if you will. So show the norm and let the crowd lead. It will make a huge difference. And this is across everything. I mean, it could be MFA deployment. It could be, I don't know, you name it. Now, the next one I like is social proof. So all the time I see cybersecurity people sending out emails saying, hey, watch out for this fish. We just had it reported, and I'm really concerned about it. But the problem is no one pays attention because it's the technical people, and the technical people live in a different world than them, at least in their opinion, and so it's not real. But if we can take and say, hey, Mia from accounting stopped a $50,000 wire scam yesterday, now it becomes more real because it's their coworker from down the hall that reported it. So we're using social proof. And if you go back into motivation, what are we doing? We're publicly praising Mia now as well. And so we're motivating people to report more because people love to be praised. Ego is a powerful, powerful motivator. And if you're phishing executives, it's a very great tactic to get them to click too. No joke, the keynote phish is brilliant. I don't care if they're deathly afraid of getting up on stage, they'll click on it. But I digress. So the next one is authority bias. I highlight this one because this simple email or a simple email from the CEO would stop these dead in the tracks. The only reason that we still have these gift card scams being successful is because that employee has never received an email from that CEO. Now, I'm not saying we want the CEO to actually email every single employee. No, we want to be able to put an email from the CEO on autopilot to every single new employee. But that email needs to say, hey, listen, I will never ask you to buy gift cards. Security is is critical to keeping our business, our customers, and your income safe. So this is, one of the most basic ones, but it's also so simple. We can stop these attacks dead simply by making sure the first email they get from the CEO is not a spoofed one from the bad guys. Now, this is one of my favorite. I love NIST. They've done a lot of great things, but I do think they did us as an industry a disservice when it came to their policy templates. How many people base their policy off the NIST templates? I see quite a few hands. And I don't blame you, because before ChatGPT, we had NIST. Jokes aside, the problem with their policy is that it is very, very technical, and employees don't understand what they signed. But everybody has this commitment bias, and the commitment bias says that if I put my word to something, I'm going to try to make good on it. I know there's some people that may not, but 99.9% of people have a commitment bias. And so if we simply change our policy to make it human readable, we get a huge difference. We went back through and did this for a bunch of our customers as well as ourselves about 2 years ago. We started with our master security policy, and that is nothing more than this pledge that you see right here. That is the first thing that every employee signs. And then all of our individual policy documents, like let's take the acceptable use policy, they are no more than 10 bullet points. And the employees sign each and every one. They're all human readable. Now, are you going to cover as much technical as you did? No, but you're going to cover the big things, and your employees will actually obey and follow the rules versus just signing them and having no clue what they signed. So I really can't encourage you enough to really rethink the way you're doing your policy, because our policy was written, it seems like by lawyers for the most part, and it's not human. And if we can make it human, we get better results. Here's another one. Did anyone hear about the attack last Christmas where attackers would actually send a physical gift to people? And then there would be a QR code that you could scan to find out who sent you that gift. Of course, no one said that. Well, I guess somebody did send you the gift, but the bad guys. And you scan the QR code, and of course, you get exploited. Whereas we can take that same thing. Hey, report a phish, get a free Starbucks or whatever. So these are just a few examples of these different cognitive biases that are regularly used against us and how they can be used to make our people more secure. AI is changing security awareness very quickly. Number one, deep fakes are becoming the norm. How many people have seen deep fakes targeting their organization already? I see a few hands. So I host a podcast called Fishing for Answers. Favorite thing about it is that I get to talk to some of the top CIOs and CISOs across the globe regularly. And I will tell you, every single Fortune 500 CISO that I've talked to has already seen deep fakes. This isn't just an event or an incident that happened in Hong Kong. It's gone way beyond that now, and it's a regular, everyday sort of thing. And has anyone seen, Sora 2, the new videos? I mean, that's insane. I thought VO was good, but Sora is way better. And it's insane what they can do, how quickly they can do it. I mean, you can clone anyone's voice from nothing more than 30 seconds of audio these days. And the more audio you have, the better. Think about that. All of our executives are very high profile, typically public figures, that there is a lot of audio and video of them. That means they are some of the people in our organization that can be the easiest to fake, to deep fake. So we've got to make sure that we're training our people. And that means staying up on all the latest threats. Right now, how many people have AI training as part of their security awareness? Got a few. I'm guessing it's mostly about privacy, using acceptable AI, stuff like that. But it's also about how to mitigate deep fakes and training people to check out, through outside channels. In my experience, the most effective way to mitigate deep fakes is low tech. I know there's all these tools to determine if it's a deep fake or whatever, but simply picking up a phone and calling a number that you know is good is one of the best ways possible, or best ways to mitigate it. And also making sure your employees know the policy. Like, we will never ask you to send a wire under these circumstances. And then enabling and empowering your employees to say no, even if they think it's to the CFO, because it is outside of policy. Employees have to know they're not going to get in trouble for that, or that authority tactic works very well against them, because people almost get blinded when these biases happen. I remember one of my most memorable social engineering experiences. So on this particular penetration test, I called up and got domain admin over the phone within the first 5 minutes. It doesn't sound like something that would happen, but you'd be surprised at how many help desk people have domain admin, have terrible passwords, and will give their passwords out over the phone. And that's exactly what happened. This guy's password was, can you guess it? Password 1, of course. He had an @ though in there, and an O for the 0, so it was super secure. Jokes aside though, we had domain admin within the first 5 minutes. So a big part of this assessment was physical security, and they wanted us to test the physical security at 5 or 6 different locations of theirs. And all of my coworkers had struck out just terribly, and we always got in. So we didn't like failing too well. And so at this point, since I'm the last person to test security, or to test physical security at a location, I say, well, let's just cheat. We have domain admin, find the gatekeeper, put an appointment on her calendar, I'll print out some business cards at Kinko's and show up. So sure enough, I do. I come in, I say, hey, I'm Jason. My name's not Jason, but I give him a card. She says, we've been expecting you, come with me. She walks me into the data center and leaves me in there all alone. I plug in, I log in. About 5 minutes later, this guy comes in and he says, who are you and why are you in my data center? And I went to latency. I always go to latency. I'm telling you, when you start talking milliseconds, people's eyes glaze over and they let you do whatever they want, or whatever you want. Well, he leaves, and about 5 minutes later, these guys that don't actually look like they're from IT anymore come in, because they're like huge, And they look like bouncers, and I'm like, okay, I'm being bounced. And they say, sir, you're gonna need to come with us. And so I pack up, I step out into the hallway, and when I get out into the hallway, I notice that word has spread in that 5 minutes that they caught somebody in their data center. And by the way, this is a major multinational law firm. They help people with cyber incidents. So like if you caught somebody in your data center, you might call them to ask them what to do. At this point, when I walk onto the hallway and I realize that the halls are lined with everybody from the 3 floors that they have crammed into this hall to see the action, I realize they're looking for a show. Why don't I give them one? So I muster up my best Jersey Shore. I start cussing. I tell them that it's my anniversary. I'm going to end up getting a divorce because I can't finish my job. I'm going to have to work late. I'm going to miss my reservation. Just all kinds of stuff. Even throw in a few like PG-13 choice cuss words. You can't go too harsh, but to make it believable, you gotta do that. And what happens is everyone watches the show. I'm able to get onto the elevator and actually leave. And it wasn't until after the elevator doors closed behind me, with no one escorting me, that they looked at each other and they said, oh shit, we should have detained him. And that is how I discovered the denial of thinking attack. And I highlight this because people do not think about security when they're in the middle of one of these things. So whatever the bias is that's being exploited will prevent them from thinking about what they're supposed to do and doing the right thing. With that, thank you so much, everybody. It's been an absolute pleasure to be here, and please feel free to reach out to me online. I was blessed when I first got into this industry with a legend in the field, Win Schwartau. He sort of took me under his wing, mentored me, and I was just complete noob, could not believe that this guy was giving me his time and his energy, and I try to do the same, so please don't be intimidated. I only look unfriendly, I'm not, but please feel free to reach out, and this has been a wonderful conference. Thank you so much. Yes?
Were you really mentored by Win, or are you just appealing to authority?
No, I was, yes. Any other questions? Yes? So I break my users up into risk groups. So I have my low risk, my medium risk, and my high risk, and that's all based on their phishing susceptibility, nothing else. And then I fish my low risk a minimum of once a month, and my high risk at least once every other week. Now, I think you can go higher, particularly with your chronic clickers. And the beauty of adapting it is that you could fish your 1% of chronic clickers. You could fish them weekly. You could fish them twice a week, and no one's going to complain. Whereas if you're fishing the whole organization that much, you're going to get a lot of pushback. Yes? You. Yeah, you're going to get a lot better retention if you put it on that landing page, or if you can figure out a trigger to make sure that as second they click that they're getting that follow-up email. But yeah, the landing page is a great place to put it because the only way they see that is if they click. Yes?
Time for one more.
One more question, you. Oh, well, in that case, wasn't exactly using her access. Her job was to let me in, and so she had gone to IT, gotten the credentials for me ahead of time, and let me in. So I wouldn't call it tailgating. But I will say, the reason I started a security awareness company was because I tailgated off the same person 4 years in a row, and that was my breaking point. All right, thank you so much.